So, Jack, we've just finished recording our episode on Joy Division and their album Unknown Pleasures. So I guess it's important to kind of look into their back catalogue.
Yeah, we thought we'd do a bit of a deep dive into their catalogue, didn't we?
So 3 albums. We've looked at Warsaw by Warsaw. We've looked at Closer by Joy Division and Movement by New Order.
Yeah, so 3 albums all in the sort of Joy Division world. We're going to play a game of Love Like Skip, aren't we? So,
fan favourite.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Can't get enough.
So, we've given each of these a listen and we're going to decide which of them we love, which one we like, and which one we're going to skip.
Okay, so should we start with Warsaw by Warsaw?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, interesting one this. No release date. It was recorded, wasn't it? But the bands weren't happy with the production on the album. So it never did get released until kind of later on. I think it was released in 1980. So the album itself, they were briefly associated with RCA Records.
Yeah, so recorded in May 1978. It comprised 11 tracks, now known collectively as the RCA Sessions.
And as mentioned previously, the band were disappointed with the post-production work done, and the album was eventually scrapped.
Yeah, so 4 of the songs recorded during the RCA sessions had previously been recorded at the end of 1977. Those were Warsaw, No Love Lost, Leaders of Men, and Failures. And it was these older recordings that the band would release the following month as their debut EP, An Ideal for Living.
So, Jack, what did you think?
Yeah, I found it very interesting to go back and listen to this lost album, so to speak. I think it gives a great insight into the early days of the band. You can really hear their punk rock influences. So I'm thinking songs like Failures and Interzone.
Yeah.
A bit of a sliding doors moment, maybe. So perhaps if this had been released, would it have been seen in the same high regard as Unknown Pleasures? And would Unknown Pleasures have been released at all? I really enjoyed listening to the version of Transmission on this album. I think it's so interesting to hear the evolution of this song from here to the version that was eventually released.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot rawer, isn't it? Than it is on Unknown Pleasures. And kind of on that line, I guess, that's what I particularly enjoy about this album. It's the raw sound that's produced. And I know, as mentioned in our Unknown Pleasures episode, Peter Hook did too. And this is basically how he wanted Joy Division to sound. Much closer to the punk rock than the dark and more atmospheric sound that Joy Division produced. And you can really hear the influence of Sex Pistols, Buzzcocks and the Stooges in this record. Yeah,
this album's got a real punk rock vibe to it. And I was kind of thinking, like, this album, if it had been released, would it have just got lost in the sort of all the other punk rock that was around at the time?
Yeah.
I think the thing that made Unknown Pleasures so successful was that it was so different to everything else that was around at the time. Whereas this, I think, might have just kind of blended in with the background a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe the band would have felt maybe kind of disheartened by its lack of success if the market was kind of saturated with this kind of sound.
Yeah, you mentioned Peter Hook's views on it as well, how this is how he wanted Joy Division to sound, but maybe being swayed into the alternate sound of Joy Division that we got on Unknown Pleasures.
Yeah. Thanks to Martin Hannett.
Yeah. I think that ultimately was the right call. Because I do think... I think whereas Unknown Pleasures stands out as something completely different and alternative, this, is very, I don't want to say samey, but it kind of does fit. It sounds very similar to a lot. It sounds very similar to a lot of the stuff that was around at the time.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are some tracks on here that I'd have loved Joy Division to have gone on and recorded. You know, one of my favourite Joy Division / Warsaw songs is No Love Lost.
Right.
I mean, the opening to that track is just incredible. And I'd love to have seen Joy Division record that more professionally, if that makes sense, to see what it would have sounded like. But it's certainly an album that should deserve more credit. And it's kind of, I guess, a part of Joy Division DNA, and all fans should know about this album. Sorry. Okay,
let's have a look at Closer. So this was released in 1980 on the Factory Records label, and it was the second and final studio album released by Joy Division, released 2 months after the suicide of the band's lead singer and lyricist Ian Curtis. Produced again by Martin Hannett. His production has been highly praised, with Pitchfork describing it as sepulchral.
Great word.
I definitely know what that means.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So, Far Out Magazine said of the album in 2023, Closer acts as an unfulfilled promise of what was to come. The Joy Division sound have developed so much between Unknown Pleasures and Closer, becoming more skillful, confident and experimental. If that process was able to continue into the 1980s without Ian's untimely death, who knows what musical brilliance might have ensued. On the other hand, perhaps Closer acts as a fitting conclusion to the work of the band. The record seems to be the apex of everything the band had been trying to achieve up to that point.
High praise.
Absolutely.
So yeah, what did you think of this album?
It's an album that I feel you can split into kind of two parts. That first half, songs such as Atrocity Exhibition, Isolation, Passover and Colony still has that classic Joy Division sound, and almost kind of picks up where Unknown Pleasures left off, intense, edgy and full of dark energy. But the second half gets much darker, I think. Heart and Soul, 24 Hours, The Eternal, very introspective and emotionally very heavy. And I think at the time you can kind of hear where Ian Curtis was in his kind of mind. Not the easiest of listens, in the sense of the dark themes that come out of these songs. Very powerful, and I guess really sad that he was struggling so much.
Yeah, I think, like you say, this album is emotionally a lot deeper than Unknown Pleasures. And I think you can tell that the band have developed in their songwriting abilities. It's kind of like they've learnt the lessons from making the first album and put that into this new one. Isolation is my favourite track on this album, and it's one of my all-time favourite Joy Division songs. 24 Hours is also a standout song for me. Yeah, like you say, a lot of heavy stuff on here, especially viewed in hindsight. For me, if I had to choose between Unknown Pleasures and Closer, I would choose Unknown Pleasures. I think perhaps that's just because I know that one better. Like, I've listened to that so much, it's really sort of ingrained within me. Closer is an album that I know about and I've listened to a few times, but it's never really stuck with me in the same way that Unknown Pleasures did.
Yeah, I think that they're obviously two very different albums, aren't they? And I think the album Closer is harder to listen to. Like, it's a beautiful record, beautifully produced, written, the instrumentals and the obviously the new synths that were being used on the album. It's not something you can necessarily just sit down and listen to like you can on Unknown Pleasures, because of, as we've mentioned, the heavy nature of the emotions kind of within the lyrics. So,
shall we have a look at Movement then? So, this was the debut album from New Order.
Yeah, so released in 1981, again on the Factory record label, and recorded in the wake of Ian Curtis' suicide in the previous year, so very quick to get this released. And it is a continuation of the dark post-punk sound of Joy Division's material. However, a lot more synthesizers being used on this record.
So at the time of its release, the album was not particularly well received by critics or audiences, only peaking at number 30 on the UK albums chart. The band would gradually shift to a more electronic sound over the course of the next year.
And I guess retrospectively, this album has received critical acclaim, and a lot of reviewers kind of praise it as an album that's the middle ground between the band's work as Joy Division and their subsequent alternative dance material that they would go on to be very successful in producing.
Slant magazine placed the album at number 42 on its list of the best albums of the 1980s, saying it exists almost exactly in between Joy Division's post-punk sound and the synth-pop style that would become to define New Order and influence pop music for decades.
So, Jack, what were your thoughts on this album?
So, personally, I've never been like a massive New Order fan. It's not that I don't like them, it's just they've never really been on my radar, if that makes sense. And this was actually the first time I'd listened to this album from start to finish. But definitely enjoyed it. Sounds like, to me, it's a bridge between Joy Division and then the more electronic, synthy stuff that New Order would become best known for in their later albums. You got songs like Truth and Senses, which feel very much like Joy Division songs. Songs like Chosen Time and Denial have more of a New Order feel to them. A favourite song for me would be Dreams Never End, which is the song that opens the album. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. My favourite track on this album is also Dreams Never End, and as an album, I do really like it. Again, I'm a huge fan of New Order, so they definitely improved it as they developed and as they grew as a band. And interestingly, Peter Hook at the start of the band's journey, I guess, was the main vocalist, and I think he almost tries to mimic Ian Curtis at points. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, there's definitely a few songs where you forget you're not listening to Ian Curtis.
Yeah.
It does sound very similar.
Yeah, and then when it obviously went over to Bernard Sumner, who kind of took over as the lead vocalist, in their early performances, you can clearly see Sumner struggling to be a vocalist, because I think they're both, Hook and Sumner, were very much like, do we try and mimic what Ian Curtis sounded like, or do we go in a different direction? And clearly that they did. I really do enjoy the use of drum machines and the heavy synth on this record, and it essentially was the early DNA of what New Order would become as a band. They would go on and become one of the most successful synth pop bands the UK I think have ever produced, and songs like Temptation, Age of Consent, Bizarre Love Triangle, and of course Blue Monday. Apparently the best-selling 12-inch song of all time.
Oh, wow, okay.
I think that's correct. I'll have to double-check that. But yeah, really enjoyed it, and I think they did a good job considering what had happened to the band only a year ago.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that, isn't it? Like we talked about the interesting kind of vocals and who was going to do it, and obviously this is only a year after Close has been released and a year after Curtis has died. Yeah. So they've really not had that much time to sort of reconfigure themselves, have they? So obviously they were they must have been learning on the job, so to speak. Like who's going to take over the vocals, who's going to play guitars, who's going to do keyboards. Yeah. So they're very much, I think, a work in progress. The band were at this stage. I think it's no secret you're more into this band than myself, so I did want to ask you a couple of things. Okay. How would you say this album compares to the later New Order albums? Would you put it on the same level as Power, Corruption and Lies and Substance, for example?
No, I wouldn't. I think they like you've summed it up perfectly. Really, they were still learning. Yeah, they were. I'm glad they didn't try and replicate the sound of Joy Division. I think they embraced new technology on this record. So naturally, they were, like you say, learning on the job. So anything they were producing after this album was only going to be better. I mean, I still think Power, Corruption and Lies is their best record. This album, it's still a bit raw, a bit hesitant, I think was a good word to use. They were kind of still unsure of themselves, and that's what makes it an interesting record. Yeah, and something I always wonder, like, if Joy Division had continued, would they have gone on to sound the way New Order did, or would they have gone in a different direction, do you think? I think that they did start to explore the more electronic sound. You can hear hints of that on Closer, can't you? Yeah, you can. And obviously with Love Will Tear Us Apart as well, there's quite a lot of electronic sounds on that record. Maybe they wouldn't have been as dancey if Ian Curtis was still around. Would he have left the band? I don't know. It's a hard one to kind of
do you think
judge,
he would have even stuck around either way? Because I get the impression that the musical style of New Order would have been out of step with Curtis's musical style. Yeah. So maybe they would have gone their separate ways anyway. Yeah. But Peter Hook stayed in the band, and obviously, he was the most punk of them all, yet they went on to be a very dancey kind of poppy synthy band, didn't they? Yeah. So he stayed. So who knows? Yeah. I guess we will never know. Right, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's do Love Like Skip. So 3 albums there. We're going to decide which one is our favourite, which one's kind of in the middle, it's okay, and which is the one we would skip. Shall we start with the one that we'd skip? Yeah. Go on. Personally, I wouldn't skip this album, but I have to, I guess, as to be a good sport. For me, I'd probably skip Movement. Interesting. I would skip Warsaw. Okay. I think for me, just because it sounds like a lot of other punk stuff that was around at the time, so it doesn't really stand out for me.
Yeah.
So I think I can get rid of this album and listen to the Buzzcocks instead.
True, but we wouldn't have had Joy Division if it wasn't for this album, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You are right.
Yeah.
There were very similar things happening at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, so which album do you like, Jack?
The one I like that I'm going to put in the middle is Closer.
Okay.
I think it's a good album. Some songs that I really, really like on it. Like I said, Isolation is one of my favourite Joy Division songs of all time. But as a complete album, I just prefer Unknown Pleasures. Okay. So, it doesn't quite get the top spot for me.
Okay. My like would be Warsaw.
Okay.
By Warsaw. I think, as I mentioned previously, it's essential listening for any Joy Division fan, and there are some songs on this album that it went on to record as Joy Division, and we know how much of a masterpiece that album was. So, yeah, for me, this is my like album. Which means the album that we love, for me, is Movement by New Order. Yep. And you're going with Closer. Closer, yeah. Nice. I think it's just an incredibly strong album, and it kind of indicates for me that as sad as this is, the album is so strong because of the themes and kind of how Kurtz had kind of just opened himself up and poured literally his heart and soul into this album, and that's what makes it such a brilliant album for me. Good stuff. Yeah, I like the New Order album just because, some really good kind of synth pop on there. Kind of lays the foundation of what was to come with not just New Order, but that whole movement in general. Yeah. So I think quite an important album. So that is our deep dive into Joy Division. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to our Unknown Pleasures album also. If you haven't listened to it yet, make sure you do go back and give that a listen. Yeah. We really had a really good sort of deep dive into that album and a good chat about it. And other than that, as ever, you can always find us on Instagram and TikTok at One More Music Pod, or you can email us onemoremusicpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from people, get your thoughts on these albums, any albums that you'd like to hear in the future as well, anything that you'd like to contribute to the show also. Feel free to get in touch with us. So that, I think, just about wraps it up. We'll be back again very soon with another episode of One More Music Pod. Next time will be Silent Alarm by Block Party, which we're very excited to talk about. So all that is now left to say is goodbye from myself, Jack. Goodbye. And goodbye from myself, Adam. Goodbye.